The soup was sweet, until the poison hit. Marlene Voss, retired nurse, sipped carefully while her son and daughter-in-law smiled like predators. Half a pill was enough to knock her out, but she stayed awake. By week's end, the will was changed, clean, final, irreversible. They tried to bury her with kindness. She served justice instead. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The soup was warm, golden, and laced with betrayal. Marlene Voss stared down into the shallow porcelain bowl in front of her, its carrot ginger swirl catching the ambient light like some kind of gilded trap. Her silver spoon trembled slightly in her hand, but she steadied it. No weakness, not tonight, not on her 71st birthday, not with them sitting across from her, watching. Taste it before it cools, Mom, Terry said, voice too smooth, too eager. His face wore that plastic smile she'd seen him practice in the mirror as a teenager when he wanted something: keys, money, forgiveness. Beside him, Brielle lifted her wine glass. Her manicured fingers sparkled under the glass chandelier, all rings and artifice. Chef said, "It's the house favorite. You'll love it." Marlene stirred the soup slowly, letting the scent rise, bright citrus, something herbal. But beneath the ginger and roasted garlic, there was a wrongness, something chalky, synthetic. Her nostrils flared. She caught it too late. She lifted the spoon and took a careful sip. It hit her tongue bitter and dull, like metal hidden in cream. Too smooth, too quiet. Seconds passed. The warmth slid down her throat like syrup. Then the buzzing started, faint at first, like the restaurant's lights were humming inside her ears. Her limbs prickled. Her vision softened at the edges. Across the table, Terry leaned back with fake ease. Brielle sipped her rosé with a satisfied blink. He whispered something that made her giggle. Marlene felt the weight creep up her spine. Her hands went cold. She set the spoon down carefully and folded her hands into her lap. If she panicked, she'd lose the only thing she had left: control. The room blurred. The chatter, the clink of plates, the jazz humming low from the corner speaker, all of it drifted like static. She let her chin dip, just slightly, as if sleep was settling over her. Jesus, that was fast. Terry muttered, his voice clearer now that she wasn't looking at him. Brielle smirked. Told you, half a tab is enough. Any more, and she'd have face planted in the bisque. They laughed, quiet and cruel, like it was a shared joke over a candlelit table, not a crime. Marlene didn't move. Her heart raced against the slow-motion act she was performing, every second stretching into raw calculation. She focused on the cold edge of the spoon against her thigh under the table, on the sound of ice clinking in her water glass. That glass was gone now. Something shifted to her right. A clean scent, pine and soap, faint cologne, came close. A whisper of movement as the water glass was swapped. A new one slid in, crisp bubbles, cooler. A male voice, low and measured. "Can I get you folks anything else, Julian?" He didn't look directly at her, just stood near, the practiced patience of an upscale waiter masking something deeper. "She's fine," Brielle chirped. "Just needs a minute. Poor thing gets lightheaded these days." Marlene could feel Julian hesitate. Then the softest tap, a napkin placed against her palm, folded, firm. His fingers brushed hers as he tucked it discreetly under her limp hand. She didn't squeeze, just let it sit there, absorbing her sweat. "I'll bring the check," Julian said. His tone didn't change, but something in it made her want to cry. Footsteps receded. Terry sighed and stood. "Let's get her home before she drools on the table. She'll wake up tomorrow and blame the heat," Brielle said, collecting her purse. "Honestly, if we'd done this sooner, we could have already listed the house." Marlene's stomach turned, but she didn't flinch. Moments later, Julian returned. He crouched beside her gently, arm brushing her shoulder as if steadying her to stand. "She's with me," he said. "I'll help her outside." Neither Terry nor Brielle objected. They were already halfway to the Vallis stand, laughing about traffic and reservations for Sunday brunch. Julian led her through the lobby like he was escorting a frail grandmother. To anyone else, it looked normal, courteous, professional. Outside, the July air hit her like a defibrillator. Cool night breeze, concrete under her feet, street lights flickering. "You're not crazy," Julian murmured as he helped her to a bench. "Don't say anything. Just read it when you're safe." Marlene's fingers curled around the note like it was a lifeline. Her breath trembled, but she gave him a nod. Julian stood, eyes sharp as he scanned the restaurant. "They're not the first I've seen pull something like this, but they might be the last." Then he stepped back into the restaurant, calm as ever. Marlene unfolded the napkin with stiff fingers. Inside was a piece of torn receipt paper. On it, in tight block letters, a message burned into her vision. "Don't trust them. Call this number." A name was scribbled underneath. Debt. Emery Wells. We PT. Marlene didn't move, not even when she heard the scrape of Bribble's chair or the faint rustle of Terry flipping through the leather-bound check presenter. Stillness was her shield now, her best weapon. Her pulse pounded behind her eyelids, but she kept her breathing shallow and slow, just enough to mimic a dazed sleep. "Can't believe that actually worked," Bribble whispered. "That soup's a miracle." Terry chuckled. "Told you. These sedatives are no joke. Half a pill, and she's out like a light." Another pause. "She looks dead." "She's not," Terry said. "Yet." Their laughter prickled like needles against her skin. Her heart was screaming, but her face stayed slack. A lifetime of nursing had taught her the trick of stillness, the discipline of silence in emergencies. Tonight that training kept her alive. Julian returned. She felt his presence before she saw it. A subtle shift in the air, the hush of controlled urgency. He didn't speak to her, but she sensed his pause, his awareness. Then his voice came low, smooth as ever. "Everything all right here?" "Yeah," Terry answered too quickly. "She just needs a minute." Long day. Julian's footsteps faded, and moments later he returned again, this time moving close, steadying her under the guise of assistance. "I'll help her out," he said. "Restaurant policy. If a guest gets lightheaded, we walk them out ourselves." Neither Terry nor Brielle argued. Their performance was over. To them she was just a limp inconvenience, now a problem solved. Outside, the restaurant lights spilled onto the sidewalk in pale amber streaks. The air had turned brisk, the sky bruised with the last hints of sunset. Marlene leaned against Julian, her legs unsteady, not from the drug, but from the surge of fury she kept locked behind her ribs. He guided her to a bench near a lamppost, one hand on her shoulder as if anchoring her to the moment. "I called you a car," he said softly. "It's 3 minutes out. Don't go back in." She nodded, still gripping the napkin that held her lifeline. Julian's voice dipped lower. "That number? It's my cousin. Detective Emery Wells, Columbus PD, specializes in elder abuse cases. You call him tonight. Don't wait." Marlene looked up at him, finally. "Why are you helping me?" Julian didn't blink. "Because I've seen this before. My grandmother. She wasn't as lucky as you." The ride pulled up. Black sedan, windows tinted. He opened the door, helped her in. Then, without a word, he stepped back into the restaurant like nothing had happened. Her home was too quiet. The kind of quiet that made every creak of the floorboards feel like a warning. Marlene locked the front door and drew the blinds, her limbs still sluggish, but her mind razor sharp. She went into the kitchen, unfolded the napkin, and stared at the number scrawled on the back of a receipt. Detail. Emery Wells, TPD. The ink was dark, hurried, but the message was clear. She picked up the cordless phone from the charger by the fridge and punched in the digits with deliberate care. Her finger hovered over the last number. "Don't accuse. Just describe." The phone rang. Once, twice. Then a voice, low, gruff, and clipped. "This is Wells." She hesitated. "My name is Marlene Voss. I think my son and daughter-in-law may have done something to me tonight. At a restaurant. I didn't pass out. I pretended. And I overheard things." "Where are you now?" he asked, tone shifting, not quite concern. but alertness. Home. Eastmore area. I was just dropped off. I haven't told anyone else yet. Tell me what you remember. Start from the beginning. Everything, even if it feels small. And she did. She told him about the soup, the metallic taste, the way her body felt like it was slipping underwater. She told him about their whispers, Julian's note, how they laughed. Wells listened in complete silence. When she finished, he said, "You need to get checked. Full lab panel." Quietly. "Do you have a doctor you trust?" "I do," she replied without hesitation. "Dr. Emily. I volunteer at her clinic sometime. She'll help me." "Good," he said. "Don't mention my name yet. Keep this between us. If they think you're onto them, they'll either bolt or get reckless. Neither is good for you." His voice dropped lower. "And Miss Voss, don't underestimate them just because you raised one of them." She hung up slowly, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline had begun to fade. The kitchen lights felt too bright. Across the room, the landline stared back at her like a loaded weapon. She picked it up again, dialed a different number this time. "Dr. Emily?" she said. When the line picked up, a yawn, then a surprised voice. "Marlene? Is everything okay?" Her grip tightened around the receiver. "I think they tried something. I need labs run." Quietly. Marlene's blood had saved lives. Tonight it might just save her own. She stood under the flickering fluorescent lights of the community clinic's back hallway, her arms stretched out under the tight wrap of a blood pressure cuff. The sleeve of her coat was rolled high, revealing the paper-thin skin of her forearm, the same arm she used to steady needles for 30 years. Now she watched the syringe fill with her own blood, dark and slow, like secrets pouring out of her. "You sure you want this under a false name?" Dr. Emily asked, her voice low and deliberate as she worked. She was the kind of physician who didn't waste words. Compact, precise, with a blunt-cut bob and tired eyes that had seen too much in too few years. Marlene nodded. "Yes. Use the alias I registered for flu trials. Diana Hanley." Emily paused, then nodded back. "All right, Diana it is." The vial clicked into place. The sound reminded Marlene of a gun chamber snapping shut. Emily labeled it quickly. Fake name, real date, initials so tiny they looked like accidental pen marks. She slipped it into a silver container and placed it in a cooler marked for courier pickup. "No one else sees this. No interns, no lab techs who ask too many questions." Emily's latex gloves squeaked as she peeled them off. "This stays between us." Marlene exhaled slowly, almost shakily. "Thank you. You looked tired when you walked in," Emily said. "But now? Now you look pissed." Marlene almost laughed. "Clothes." Emily opened a drawer and pulled out a sealed folder. "If there's anything in your system, we'll find it. But if you want my medical guess." She tapped the lid of the cooler. "If you'd had a smaller body mass, you might not have woken up." The words landed like stones. Not because Marlene hadn't suspected, but because hearing it confirmed everything she'd tried to convince herself might have been a bad dream. "This wasn't a slip," Emily said. "This was precise. Deliberate." Marlene clenched her hands into fists. "I gave birth to him, and he wanted to knock me out like a dog in the street." Emily didn't offer sympathy. Instead she offered facts, which Marlene preferred. "Tox screen takes 48 hours. Maybe less if I call in a favor. I don't want any flags on this. I'll wait." Marlene stood and reached for her coat. Her movements were slower now, not from age, but weight. The kind that lives in your chest when trust breaks clean down the middle. As she left the clinic, the Columbus night was crisp and unforgiving. The sky stretched above her like a locked vault. Back home, she padded into the bedroom and knelt before the closet. Her late husband's fireproof safe still sat in the corner, hidden beneath 2 stacked winter quilts and an old shoebox labeled Christmas cords. She punched in the code, 1749, his badge number. The safe beeped, unlatched, and inside, among the folded deeds and birth certificates, she slid the empty lab folder into place. ready to be filled. The silence of the house was interrupted by the sharp ding of her phone, a text from Terry. Hope you're feeling better. You just fainted, right? No question mark. No real concern. Another buzz followed seconds later, this one from Instagram. A tagged post from Brielle. Some people can't handle good soup. #birthday drama. Marlene didn't respond. She just stared at the screen until the light timed out. Then she flipped the phone over, face down on the table. The next afternoon her phone rang again. This time a private number. "Miss Voss," said a gravelly voice. "Wells?" She sat straighter. "Yes, I pulled some DMV traffic cams from that restaurant," he said. "Got images of your son helping you out of the car, but none of him going back for the check. It tracks." "He left me like trash," she said flatly. "I also pulled Brielle's posts. You're trending among suburban wine moms." Marlene's laugh was hollow. "Let them sip and scroll." Wells' tone sharpened. "Listen carefully. The lab results when they come in will give us options. But what I want to know right now is this." A pause. "Do you want to press charges immediately, or play this smarter?" The coffee at Frank's diner tasted like regret. Oversteeped and burnt, served in a chipped mug that had seen better decades. Marlene wrapped both hands around it anyway. It was the only thing in this place that was reliably bitter without being laced with sedatives. Across from her sat Detective Emery. Wells, tall, broad, with a hard-set jaw and a notepad that never left his grip. He stirred nothing in his own mug. Just stared. "You said no names on the record yet," Marlene began. "But what I'm about to tell you, it won't stay quiet for long." Wells gave a grunt, something between agreement and acknowledgement. "Tell it anyway." And so she did. From the soup's strange taste to Brielle's whisper, from the fake nap she took to Julian's note tucked into her palm, Marlene recalled it all. Her tone never rose. She gave it like a report, like one of the many charts she used to file as a nurse. Precise, clinical, terrifying in its calm. Wells scribbled while she talked. Only paused once. "You're sure of the wording?" Marlene nodded. "Terry said told you it'd work fast. Not might, would. He knew exactly what he gave me." Wells leaned back. "That's enough for a judge to lean in. Not enough to hold them." "I know," she replied. "Which is why we're not making a move yet." That surprised him. He tilted his head. "You're willing to wait?" Marlene looked out the window. The sky was turning the gray-blue color that always reminded her of winter hospital shifts, the hour before sunrise when you didn't know if the patient would make it. "I want them to think they got away with it," she said. "I want them confident, comfortable, careless." A small smirk tugged at Wells' lip. "Not the average scared victim." "I'm not average," she said, lifting her coffee to her lips. "And I'm not scared." By the end of the meeting a plan had taken shape, not a dramatic sting but something slower, more methodical, like a trap set with patience. Julian agreed to be part of it, without hesitation. When Wells approached him outside the restaurant that evening, the waiter looked the detective square in the eye and said, "I already cleared my weekend. Tell me where to wire up." A few days later Terry texted, "Dinner this Saturday? Just us. Thought it'd be nice to reconnect." Marlene stared at the screen a full minute before responding. "Maybe another time." Still tired from the restaurant. She knew better than to walk into another meal. The first one nearly buried her. But they were impatient. And impatient people made mistakes. That Sunday, a delivery box showed up on her front porch. Glossy cardboard with a pink satin ribbon wrapped around it. The note taped to the top was scrawled in Brielle's cursive. "Made with love. Hope your appetite's back. XOB." Marlene didn't take it inside. She brought it to the patio and opened it with gloved hands. Inside sat a pie. Strawberry rhubarb, still faintly warm, crust glistening with brushed egg wash and sugar crystals. It smelled like comfort, like deceit. She tilted the box slightly, letting the light catch the filling. That's when she saw it. Barely tucked beneath the crimped edge of the crust, a half-dissolved off-white pill. Not hidden, not masked, just melted into the edge like some careless afterthought. They weren't even trying to disguise it anymore. Her stomach twisted not from fear, but from a truth colder than anything she'd faced so far. They thought she was already too far gone to notice. Marlene didn't flinch when she saw the pill. Instead, she reached for a pair of latex gloves from the kitchen drawer, old habit from her nursing days, and one she'd never abandoned. She slipped them on without hurry. The summer breeze rustled the sheer curtain above her sink as she carried the pie box from the patio into the house, careful not to jostle it. She didn't need more crumbs covering the evidence. It smelled sweet, manipulative, a perfume of warm strawberries and buttered crust, trying too hard to smell like care. They weren't just trying to drug her, they were trying to dress it up. She laid the pie box onto her granite counter like it was a specimen, not a gift. Then she unzipped a gallon freezer bag and slid the entire box inside, sealing it with precision. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed her keys, shoved the bag into a cooler, and drove across town. Dr. Emily was waiting, alone in the clinic's back exam room. Her scrubs were wrinkled, dark circles under her eyes. Still, when Marlene placed the bag on the stainless steel tray, she didn't ask questions. She snapped on her own gloves, took one look at the pill crusted into the edge, and muttered, "Jesus Christ. Same stuff we think was in the soup." Marlene asked, voice low. "Can't say for sure until we test it," Emily said. "But it looks like crushed Zaleplon, or some off-brand sleep med. Could have knocked out a horse in that concentration." "Then send it," Marlene replied. "I'm done second-guessing." Emily nodded. "I'll hand-deliver this to the tox lab myself. Quiet, private chain of custody. 48 hours. Before she turned away, Marlene touched her wrist gently. "Emily, thank you. I know I'm dragging you into something you didn't ask for." Emily shook her head. "You didn't drag me anywhere." They did. That night, Wells returned to Marlene's house, this time with a duffel bag full of motion sensors and cameras, no bigger than thumb drives. He moved like a man who'd done this before. No wasted motion, no nervous glances. He placed a camera above the front porch light, another beneath the mailbox, two more in the hedges facing the driveway. "They show up again," he said. "I'll know what car, what time, and if they try to leave another gift." Marlene watched from her doorway, arms folded tightly over her chest. "And what if they try the back?" He didn't smile. "Already done." When he was finished, he handed her a burner phone. "Calls only come from me, Emily, or Julian. Ignore everything else." Marlene flipped it open and checked the number. She liked how small it was, how detached. Something about it felt war-ready. Then Wells leaned on the porch rail. "We're ready to set bait." Julian made the invitation look natural. A casually sent text to Bremel. Cheerful tone, thinly veiled suspicion. "Hey, I feel awful about what happened to your mother-in-law. Let me make it up to you two. First round's on me. Tomorrow night?" The response was almost instant. "You're sweet. We're in." Julian texted Wells 2 words. They bit. The next evening, Marlene walked into the restaurant just after it closed for the afternoon reset. It was quieter than she remembered. Silverware gleaming in folded napkins, wine glasses spotless on tables that waited like open ears. Wells met her at the booth in the back corner. A slim black box sat beneath the table, blinking red. "Mic's hot. Hidden under the wood lip. You'll have full audio. And the cameras, too. One in the corner vent, another in the pendant light. They won't notice a thing." Julian walked over in a fresh white button-up, and a tie that looked slightly too tight. "I'll keep the drinks coming. Get them talking." Marlene nodded. "Just make sure they keep bragging." At 6:35 p.m., Terry and Brewell walked in like they owned the place. Terry wore a navy blue gilet over a polo shirt, trying too hard to look important. Brewell was in heels too high for her posture, carrying a purse that probably cost more than her car. Julian led them to the booth. They didn't notice the light blink above them as they sat down. Brewell grinned as she glanced at the empty spot across from them. "No Marlene tonight?" Julian shook his head. She declined. "Still tired, I think." Brewell snorted. "She's been sleeping so much lately, it's kind of hilarious." Terry smirked. picked up the wine list. Well, cheers to early retirement. Right, Julian placed their glasses gently on the table, poured the wine, then stepped away. As he passed the bar, he glanced toward the kitchen and gave the quietest nod. The first thing Wells heard through his headset wasn't a voice. It was the sound of wine being poured. The glug 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 of a Merlot cascading into glass. Familiar. Innocent. Until you remembered who was doing the drinking. He sat in the surveillance van 2 blocks from the restaurant, headphones pressed tight, eyes scanning a small monitor that displayed the booth in black and white grain. Julian's timing had been perfect. The nod, the pour, the table mic now pulsing with every word they said. Terry raised his glass. To Marlene's long naps and short memory. Brielle chuckled, clinking her glass lazily. To second chances. Wells hit record on the console. Inside the restaurant, Julian smiled as he cleared an unused bread plate. Sorry again about the soup mix-up last week. We're normally sharper with dietary needs. Terry waved it off. Don't worry, she didn't even remember what she ate. Brielle leaned in, swirling her glass. Honestly, the fact that she woke up at all surprised me. She usually sleeps through half the day now. Family dinner didn't go quite how you pictured, huh? Julian said smoothly, adjusting a salt shaker. He looked bored, the perfect cover. Terry smirked. Wasn't about dinner, it was a test run. Brielle's expression tightened, but she didn't stop him. That, more than anything, made Julian's stomach turn. Test run, he repeated casually, stepping back. Terry shrugged. Just figuring out what works. You know, how fast, how much. Julian gave a small nod, as if that kind of talk was normal between bites of calamari. He took their appetizer order and disappeared into the kitchen. And just outside, Wells's jaw locked. Marlene sat at her kitchen table in silence. One hand wrapped around a lukewarm mug of chamomile. The burner phone lay beside her, face up. Each second that ticked by felt like a century pressed against her skin. She stared out the window into the backyard, where her hydrangeas drooped in the July heat. A life that once felt grounded now hung by threads. What were they saying now? Laughing? Plotting? She took a slow sip of the tea. It tasted bland. She hated that now everything did. Back in the booth, Julian returned with 2 glasses of water and placed them gently beside the wine. So he said, keeping it light, plans for the house, or still figuring that part out? Brielle beamed. Oh, once the estate gets sorted, we'll finally get that place in German Village. You should see the kitchen. Marble counters. Exposed beams. Terry scoffed. As long as we don't have to fight probate. But I doubt it. Her will's old. I checked last year. We're still the only names on it. Julian tilted his head. She doesn't have grandkids or anything? Brielle rolled her eyes. No, just some kid next door who calls her Miss Marlene, and thinks bringing up the trash earns brownie points. Terry snorted. Zoe. Yeah, cute but useless. She's not in the picture. Wells scribbled timestamps furiously in his notebook, jaw tight. Then Brielle leaned forward and whispered, Look, if she dies in her sleep, no one's going to question it. She's 71. She forgets things. She gets dizzy. It'll look natural. Julian froze. For half a breath, he stopped breathing. Then casually, too casually, he adjusted the napkin holder and walked away. In the van, Wells leaned forward so fast he almost knocked the console over. The static in his earpiece cleared just in time to catch Terry murmuring, We've got 1, maybe 2 more tries. Let's not screw them up. Back in her kitchen, Marlene's phone buzzed. 1 word, 1 message. Wells got it. Ready to move? She stared at it, heart pounding like footsteps down a long hallway. Marlene slid the pen across the final page with a steady hand and a colder heart. You're sure? Her estate planner asked, eyes flicking up over half-moon reading glasses. No secondary clause. No life use provision. Strike them clean, she said. If I go tomorrow, I want there to be no question where everything goes. They sat in a quiet office off High Street. Old brick building, leather chairs, the faint scent of cedar and parchment. A clock ticked somewhere behind her, but Marlene didn't glance at it. This was about something timeless. Choice, consequence, and clean breaks. The man nodded and tapped a few keys on his laptop. Terry and Braille Voss, formally removed. No claim to property, vehicles, or financial accounts. Next beneficiary. Zoe Mercer, she said. 19, lives next door with her mother. Currently in undergrad, pre-law. He raised an eyebrow but didn't question it. And your assets? Moving into a living trust, she said. My name only. I've already closed the joint accounts. House deed transfers by Monday. Any reason this is being rushed? Marlene looked him dead in the eye. Just good timing. Outside, the day was sharp with early August heat. Cicadas buzzed from trees like tiny alarm bells. She walked slowly, savoring the sun on her shoulders. It felt different now. Not warm, but earned. Like freedom that hadn't been free. By the time she reached home, her phone buzzed with a message from Wells. DA wants the files. Sending courier for audio today. Get Julian a copy too. Full track. She replied. I'm ready. So is he. That night, Julian stopped by after closing, still in his apron, hair damp from rinsing off hours of heat and customer complaints. He handed her a flash drive in a small white envelope. They confessed, he said. On tape. Not even subtle. She took it gently. You okay? Julian shrugged. I've worked double shifts for minimum wage and watched worse people walk free. But I've never been part of flipping the table before. Feels good. She smiled, the kind that barely reached her eyes. Let's make sure it lasts. The next morning, Wells sat across from the district attorney, audio cued, transcript printed, lab reports in a manila folder. Pi tested positive for zolpidem, crushed into crust. Same sedative class as what was in her blood work from the first incident. Wells explained. We have a motive, method, timeline, and now we've got a clean track of them joking about test dosages. The DA flipped a few pages, face unreadable. We move now? Wells shook his head. One more rope to let out. They're about to invite her to brunch. Let's see if they bring the poison again. The DA closed the folder. But she's protected? Every step, Wells said. She's not some fragile victim, she's laying a trap. That evening, as the sky dimmed and a thunderstorm rolled somewhere in the distance, Marlene sat at her kitchen table, sorting through donation letters. A knock on the door startled her, not sharp, but light, practiced. No package, no note, just her phone ringing a second later. Brielle's name flashed across the screen. Marlene answered with a calm, steady hello. Hi Marlene, we were thinking it's been a weird week, right? Brielle chirped, the kind of false warmth that scratched like wool. Let us take you to brunch Sunday. Just the three of us. Our treat. You'll love it. Marlene's mouth twitched. Not a smile. Not quite. That's very generous, she said. Let me think about it. Marlene buttoned the pale blue cardigan slowly, her hands steady even as her heart pounded behind her ribs like it was trying to warn her. Wear something you'd normally wear. Wells had said. They'll smell bait if you act too ready. But she was ready. More than they'd ever been. At her collar a vintage silver pin rested quietly, a gift from her late husband, now refitted with a button cam the size of a match head. It blinked twice when she tapped it. Live. Streaming. Across town, Julian was already at the restaurant. Booth selected. Wire in place. Kitchen cleared. The trap was set. The brunch spot was a little too curated. Faux rustic charm with mismatched chairs, exposed beams, and reclaimed wood menus that looked like someone's Pinterest board had exploded. It tried hard to feel homey, but everything smelled of lavender sanitizer and overfra. Terry stood when Marlene approached, all smiles and false gallantry. Look who's back among the living. She smiled coolly, brushing past his offered arm. Survived the soup. Brielle wore white again, always white, like it made her look clean, like she thought innocence was something you could wear. We're so glad you're feeling better, she purred, sliding into her seat. Marlene sat last. A server approached before anyone could speak further. It was Julian, clean-shaven, composed, sleeves rolled with surgical precision. Told the chef to keep it simple today, he said. Voice even. Start with drinks. Terry grinned. Mimosas, and she'll want her smoothie. Marlene didn't blink. Smoothie? Brielle leaned forward. Smile razor thin. We made one at home and brought it for you. Extra vitamins. I figured you wouldn't mind. Julian stiffened, but Marlene raised a hand before he could speak. How thoughtful, she said. Let's see it. Brielle reached into her oversized purse and pulled out a travel cup with a purple lid. Condensation beaded down the sides. Still cold. Marlene took it and swirled the liquid. It was pale pink, something creamy and sweet-smelling, almost cloying. Strawberry? Banana? There was a faint trace of something bitter beneath the fruit. Her nurse's instincts kicked in instantly. She set the cup on the table, then looked straight at Brielle. You drink it first. Terry laughed too loud. She made it for you, Ma. Marlene didn't move. And I'm saying she should take the first sip. That's only fair. Brielle's smile twitched, just slightly. Julian returned with a tray of mimosas, setting one in front of each of them. Well? Marlene asked again, tapping the smoothie with a single fingernail. Let's toast. Like family. Brielle opened her mouth, then paused. That half-second of hesitation was volcanic. Terry's jaw tightened. This is ridiculous, he snapped, reaching across the table and yanking the smoothie from Marlene's hand, so hard the lid popped slightly. You don't trust us now? After everything? After everything? Marlene said calmly. I think trust is something we've all misplaced. Julian lingered by the table, clearing imaginary crumbs. Across the street, inside an unmarked van, Wells watched the body language on his monitor change. All three targets in frame. Audio clear. Hands tense. Eyes narrowing. The air was about to shift. He leaned forward and hit record again. Hard. Marlene reached into her purse and slowly took out a cloth napkin, her fingers trembling slightly, though not from fear. Let's toast then. She raised her mimosa, eyes never leaving Brielle, who sat frozen, unsure whether to smile or scream. Julian stepped back. Ready when you are, he muttered under his breath, the phrase doubling as confirmation for Wells through his mic. Terry's grip on the smoothie cup tightened until the plastic creaked under his fingers. I said this is ridiculous, he hissed, eyes flaring. You think we'd poison you over brunch? Marlene didn't blink. I don't think anything. I know. For a moment the only sound at the table was the faint hum of the espresso machine behind the bar and the soft chime of silverware from another section of the restaurant. Then Julian moved, casual as ever, wiping down a nearby table, but his eyes cut to the kitchen door. One nod, subtle, controlled. The signal. Inside the back corridor, Detective Emery Wells straightened his blazer and stepped forward. Two uniformed officers, flanking him, shoes thudding softly against the polished wood floors. He pushed through the swinging door just as Julian returned to the table. Terry was mid-rant, hands gesturing wildly, the smoothie cup now sweating on the table. You know what? I don't even care what you think anymore. You've always been dramatic. Always. Wells' voice cut the air clean. Terry Voss. Brielle Voss. Both froze. Terry turned slowly, like he wasn't sure if he'd imagined it. Brielle's fingers had just wrapped around her mimosa glass, but she dropped it when she saw the badge. Columbus PD, Wells continued. Stepping forward, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit elder abuse, attempted poisoning, and reckless endangerment. The blood drained from Terry's face. What? No, you. What is this? The first officer moved behind Brielle, snapping the cuffs on her wrists before she could even protest. Julian stepped back just enough to avoid the chaos, then calmly reached into his apron and placed a small black leather folder on the table. The check? Terry gawked at him. What the hell is this? Julian straightened his tie. The bill. Brielle broke. This isn't happening. This can't be happening. I didn't even touch her. It was just, he told me. He said it wasn't enough to hurt her. Wells didn't flinch. We have the lab results. We have the audio. We have the video. And we have motive, Miss Voss. Plenty of it. The second officer guided Terry to his feet, hands cuffed tightly behind his back. You can't do this, Terry spat. We'll sue everyone. You don't know who I work with. Marlene stood slowly, rising from her seat like gravity no longer mattered. She faced her son, calm and unshaken. And I hope, she said. The soup was worth it. Brimel sobbed now, makeup streaking down her cheeks, the picture of unraveling. We didn't mean to hurt her, she choked out. You didn't mean? Marlene repeated, stepping forward, lowering her voice. You left a pill in my crust, Brimel. You poured poison into my smoothie. You didn't mean? The restaurant had gone quiet. A couple in the corner had stopped mid-bite. A busboy froze with a tub of dirty dishes in his arms. The takedown wasn't just a scene. It was theater. Public, undeniable, humiliating. Terry turned toward Marlene as the officer pulled him away. You're going to regret this. No, she said. I already regretted trusting you. Wells approached her quietly as the officers escorted the pair out the front door and into the waiting cruiser. You okay? He asked. Marlene exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. I'm not broken, she said. Just bruised. Julian stepped back to the table, brushing a linen napkin over the wood grain. He gestured toward the check still resting beside Marlene's empty water glass. You forgot one thing, he said. Smiling just slightly, she glanced down. The leather billfold, a silver pen resting across it. She picked up the pen, clicked it once and signed her name at the bottom of the check with slow, deliberate strokes. Then she looked up at Julian, her voice firm and clear. Justice. The courtroom filing room smelled of stale paper, citrus cleaner and the lingering weight of lives in transition. Marlene stood at the counter in a soft gray blouse, hands folded over the copies of her newly filed documents. 2 restraining orders. One for Terry, one for Brimel. Stamped, notarized. Official. She didn't tremble when the clerk slid the copies back across the counter. Would you like certified duplicates mailed as well, Miss Voss? Yes, Marlene said, her voice like polished glass. Let's make sure they don't forget. The woman nodded without comment, but when she handed over the envelope, her expression shifted, respect maybe, or disbelief. Marlene had started to recognize the difference. The buzz began before the courthouse door even closed behind her. By the next morning, the news had spread across Eastmore and beyond. Local couple arrested for elder poison plot. The articles danced between shock and voyeurism, but the facts held. There was no spin big enough to hide what had happened. Her phone lit up with messages from neighbors, clinic volunteers, 2 people she hadn't heard from since her husband's funeral. Saw the article. I'm speechless. If you ever need anything you let me know. God, Marlene. They tried to kill you? She didn't respond to most. Just read, deleted. But one she saved from Zoe. They always underestimated you. I never did. Zoe arrived the next day. A bakery box in hand and a fire in her eyes that warmed every room she entered. She looked older than Marlene remembered. Her shoulders squared, her backpack slung low with books she carried like they were weapons. They said you were resting. Zoe said, setting the box down. I didn't want to bother you, but I needed to see for myself. Marlene opened the lid. Lemon tarts. No poison. Just sugar, zest, and sincerity. I'm resting, she said. Not retreating. Zoe smiled. Good. They sat in silence. Tart between them, steam rising from mismatched mugs of tea. When Zoe finally spoke again, it was low, almost hesitant. Why didn't you tell anyone? Before Marlene met her eyes. Because I needed them to believe I was weak. And because part of me didn't want to admit how deep the betrayal ran. Zoe nodded slowly. Well, they got a headline. You got the last word. A week later, Marlene walked into the East Side Legal Aid Clinic with her volunteer badge clipped firmly to her blouse. The building was simple. 2 floors, outdated carpet, one busted light in the hallway, but to her it smelled like purpose. Her role was administrative but meaningful. Intake forms, phone screenings, file audits, nothing flashy but everything vital. She didn't tell anyone what had happened, not directly. But word had traveled. One of the interns, a nervous young man with an armful of case files, whispered to a colleague as she passed, "That's her. The one from the poisoning thing." Marlene kept walking. Let them whisper. Let them wonder. Later that evening, Julian found an envelope taped to the restaurant's back door. No note, just his name written neatly across the front. Inside, a $500 Visa gift card and a single post-it note that read from a survivor, "Thank you for not looking away." He sat down on a crate of limes in the prep kitchen and stared at it for a long time, jaw clenched, eyes burning. Then he tucked it into his wallet and went back to work. Brielle's bail hearing was brief. The judge didn't flinch when he denied the request. Risk of flight, risk of witness interference, risk of escalation. She screamed in the hallway after the ruling, but Marlene wasn't there to hear it. She was at home, sipping tea in her reading chair, when the mail dropped through the slot and slid across the wood floor like an omen. She bent to pick it up. Just one envelope this time. Legal-sized. No return address. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the seal was government. Inside, a formal letter from Terry's public defender. The letter opened with a plea, not an apology. Marlene read it twice under the yellow light of her kitchen, the paper trembling just slightly in her hands. The tone was rehearsed, clinical, not Terry's words, but his attorney's. "Your Honor, my client's actions were not malicious in intent, but rather born from prolonged financial duress and psychological fatigue. Mr. Voss has been the sole provider for his household and is experiencing the effects of compounding economic strain, coupled with the deterioration of his relationship with the alleged victim." She stopped there. Alleged victim. The phrase sat on her tongue like acid. Outside, the wind rustled the trees in sharp bursts, tossing dead leaves across her porch, like nature's own verdict. She set the letter down beside her teacup, not even bothering to fold it. The courtroom was fuller than she expected. Rows of observers, law students, maybe journalists. A few familiar faces from her clinic sat quietly in the back. None of them said anything. They didn't need to. When the clerk asked if she'd like to provide a victim impact statement, Marlene stood. But she didn't move to the witness box. She simply spoke from her place at the aisle. "He made a choice," she said clearly. "So did I." There was no tremor in her voice. Only resolve, aged not from time, but truth. The judge gave a slow nod and gestured for her to sit. No fanfare, just gravity. Dr. Emily's testimony followed. Her tone was medical, sharp, but lined with anger just beneath the surface. "I ran 2 toxicology reports. One on blood drawn within 12 hours of ingestion, one on a food sample brought in 3 days later. Both revealed sedatives, not just trace amounts, but significant enough to impair motor function. We're not talking about a mistake here. This was deliberate." She submitted lab documentation, chain of custody verification, and dosage estimates. Her last line before stepping down stayed in the air like a flare. "This could have killed someone smaller. That's not stress, that's assault." Wells submitted the pie analysis to the court personally. A sealed evidence bag, containing the crust sample, was passed from hand to hand, judge to clerk to bailiff, all eyes glancing at it with the unease of a thing that looked innocent but wasn't. "The couple delivered that pie to her front porch," he said. No note, no explanation, just a second attempt at a first failure. He let that hang before continuing. "We have them on audio, on video, laughing about it. This isn't desperation. It's calculation." No further comment. The judge leaned back in his chair, quiet, absorbing it all. The turning point came when Bribilt's attorney stood and requested a private sidebar. The conversation took less than 5 minutes. When they returned to open court, the lawyer cleared her throat. "Miss Voss would like to offer a statement as part of a plea agreement." She accepts full responsibility for her involvement and wishes to cooperate with the prosecution. She is prepared to testify against Mr. Terry Voss. Terry turned to her with fury in his eyes, his face slack with betrayal. You said we were in this together, he growled. She didn't meet his gaze. You said it wouldn't go this far. Brielle answered without speaking, her silence louder than anything she could have said. It was the sound of someone deciding who she wouldn't go down for. That night, Marlene returned home, her house dim and quiet again, the way it used to feel before the shadows wore familiar faces. The mail waited in the usual spot. Just one item today. A handwritten envelope. Unfamiliar scrawl, but not Terry's. Inside was a short note on plain white stationery. You're stronger than most of the men I've ever worked with. You didn't just survive. You made sure it mattered. Glad you're still standing. Ewell's Marlene read it once, folded it neatly, and slid it into the drawer beneath the good cutlery, the one she used when people she trusted came over. Marlene walked to the witness stand with the weight of generations in her steps. The courtroom felt colder than she expected, not from the air conditioning, but from the silence, thick and reverent. She felt the eyes on her attorneys, court staff, strangers in suits, but it was the row in the back that held her attention. Gray hair, walkers, cardigans, wrinkled hands folded in laps. Elders, survivors. One woman gripped a rosary. Another dabbed at her eyes. Marlene didn't nod to them, didn't smile. She simply took her seat, straightened her back, and folded her hands. The bailiff swore her in. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth? I do, she said, her voice as steady as the bench beneath her.
Reach.
The prosecutor stood. Miss Voss, can you briefly describe your relationship to the defendants? Marlene looked across the courtroom. Terry sat in a blazer that no longer fit him properly. His hair was unkempt, his jaw tight. He didn't look at her. Brielle was pale, lips drawn tight, her posture slouched as if bracing for a blow. My son, Marlene said. And his wife. And did you have any reason to believe they meant you harm? No, she answered, letting the words settle. Not at first. The prosecutor nodded. What changed? They brought me soup, Marlene said. Then they brought me a pie, then a smoothie, and they smiled every time they did it. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. The judge gave a glance, and silence returned. What made you suspicious? Marlene's voice was calm, but each syllable cut like clean glass. Because I tasted metal, because I slurred my words, because I've administered enough sedatives in my career to know when I've been dosed. No theatrics, no emotion, just fact. Julian sat near the back of the room, wearing his white server's jacket like armor. He leaned forward slightly, hands clasped, watching the woman who weeks earlier had nearly collapsed at his table, but now stood like stone in a building made of paper. The prosecutor continued. And when you realized what they'd done, what did you do? I listened, Marlene said. I documented, I tested, I watched them tighten the noose they thought they were building for me. She turned her head slightly, toward the defense table. For a moment Terry looked up, but only for a moment. Then his eyes dropped. They thought I was disposable, she said. Louder now, but they forgot who raised them, who cleaned their messes, who stitched wounds with a needle and hand that didn't shake. The prosecutor stepped back. No further questions. The defense declined cross-examination. Marlene stepped down slowly. The sound of her shoes on the floor echoed louder than anything she'd said. She passed the defense table without pausing. Terry's fists were clenched on his thighs. Brielle wiped at her face with a balled-up tissue, red-eyed and small. Neither looked at her. Good. The judge cleared his throat. Miss Brielle Voss, please stand. Brielle rose shakily, barely able to hold her own weight. Her sentence came like the dropping of a gavel, even before the sound. 3 years in a state correctional facility. Eligibility for parole in 18 months, contingent on cooperation and further testimony. She nodded once, jaw trembling. The judge then turned his gaze to Terry. Mr. Voss, he said, voice darkening. You were the architect of this betrayal, the one who should have known better. The court recognizes the influence of your spouse's testimony, but your actions go beyond recklessness. They're calculated and cowardly. He paused, letting the tension bloom. Your sentence will be harsher. The judge didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Terry Voss, he said, you are hereby sentenced to 8 years in state custody for attempted poisoning, conspiracy to commit elder abuse, and reckless endangerment. You'll be eligible for parole in 5, with good behavior. The courtroom didn't gasp. It didn't need to. The real reaction came in Terry's eyes, a flicker of disbelief quickly swallowed by the weight of what couldn't be undone. The sentence landed not like thunder, but ice, a slow creeping freeze that told him his time was up. Marlene sat stone still in the gallery. No smile, no satisfaction, just a final breath slowly let out. Terry didn't turn to face her. Cowards rarely look at the people they've hurt once the door closes. By Tuesday morning, their mugshots were public. The headline on the Columbus Dispatch homepage read, "Son and daughter-in-law convicted in attempted poisoning of retired nurse mother. Public records confirm felony charges." Underneath, their faces were locked in forever. Terry's unshaven jaw clenched, Brielle's mascara smudged under her lower lid like a wound. Public record now. No hiding. Marlene printed the article once and folded it neatly into her file drawer under legal closed. 2 days later, a small envelope arrived in her mailbox. No return address, but she recognized the looping handwriting immediately. Terry's sister, Claudia. A woman who'd always kept her distance, but never crossed her. Inside, a handwritten card. Marlene, I'm sorry for what my brother did. I don't know when he lost himself. I stayed out of the mess because I thought it would pass. I was wrong. If there's ever anything I can do for you, let me know. I never sided with him, and I never will. It wasn't flowery. It didn't fix anything. But it didn't pretend to. Marlene tucked it beside the letter Wells had sent weeks earlier. Not out of sentiment, but acknowledgement. The revised will was filed the same day Terry reported to the state penitentiary. Marlene had timed it that way, on purpose. The probate clerk raised an eyebrow at the paperwork. All to a neighbor's daughter. She's more family than anyone who shared my blood, Marlene replied. Zoe Mercer's name now sat on every line that mattered. Primary beneficiary of the estate, sole executor and trustee of the educational fund, Marlene had created in silence over the last 6 weeks. The girl didn't know it yet, but she would. Soon later that week, Marlene stood inside the empty restaurant during morning prep. The place was quiet, no customers, just the clatter of dishes and the aroma of bleach and roasted beans. Julian stepped out of the back with flour on his apron, rubbing his hands with a towel. You didn't have to come in so early, he said. We've got this handled. I'm not here to help, Marlene said. I'm here to deliver something. She handed him a slim, unwrapped box. No bow, just wait. Julian opened it and stared. A gleaming new La Marzocco espresso machine, top of the line shining like chrome armor. Don't ask how I afforded it, she said. Let's just say I moved some things around. He looked at her, eyes glassy. Why? Because I needed something beautiful to come out of all this, she replied. And because I want the next person you notice like you noticed me, to be offered more than just a napkin with a phone number. Detective Emery Wells called her later that night. His voice was lighter than usual, nearly relaxed. Well, he said, officially closed the file today. Judge called it airtight. I call it one of the cleanest takedowns I've had in 22 years. Marlene sat in her den, curtains open to the fading light, glass of chilled white wine in hand. Thank you, she said. You were the sharpest witness I've ever worked with, he added. But more than that, you weren't afraid to wait. Most people panic. You made them sweat. There was a pause, a smile in his voice. Ever consider consulting? She laughed. Only if it pays better than Social Security. The next morning she stepped out onto her porch, and found a young woman with a messenger bag and a press badge waiting at the gate. "Mrs. Voss," the reporter called. "I'm with Ohio Watch. I know the case is closed, but we're doing a series on elder justice people who fought back. Would you consider going on record?" Marlene tilted her head. "Why now?" "Because your story's already started changing things," the woman said. "People want to know how you did it." Marlene folded her arms, eyes sharp behind her glasses. "Maybe it's time they heard it from me. I'm not here to make anyone look worse than they already do," Marlene said, crossing one leg over the other. Voice measured, eyes steady. The young reporter across from her nodded. Recorder already running, pen hovering above a notepad. They sat in Marlene's den, sunlight filtering through gauzy curtains, the faint scent of lemon oil and brewed coffee in the air. "I just want your words. The ones you never got to say in court," the reporter said softly. Marlene gave a half smile. "I said plenty. But I suppose I saved a few." The article ran 2 days later in the Columbus Sun. Marlene hadn't expected much. A tucked-away local interest piece, maybe a few kind emails from neighbors. Instead, it ran with a front-page banner headline, "She survived the soup and served justice." There was her photo half-lit in the diner, where she met Wells for the first time, the same pin she'd worn to brunch clipped to her sweater. The piece was sharp, direct and unsparing, not just about what happened, but about what it meant. "I didn't want to be the woman who almost died quietly. I wanted to be the one who made sure it didn't happen to the next person." By the end of the week, emails began pouring in. A legal advocacy nonprofit in Michigan wrote first, then one from Virginia, then a clinic in Minneapolis that specialized in financial abuse against seniors. "Would you be willing to speak on a panel? We'd love to hear how you navigated the system. Your voice could help others come forward." Dr. Emily forwarded her a request from the Ohio Medical Review. They wanted her to co-author a public education piece about recognizing non-obvious poisoning symptoms in elderly patients. "I know you're not a doctor anymore," the email read, "but your instincts were better than half our staff's." Julian's phone rang off the hook. By Friday, the reservation list at the restaurant had doubled. Saturday morning, a woman with silver hair and a walker came in just to meet him. She didn't order food, just asked for a glass of water and said, "You noticed something that matters." Julian called Marlene after closing. "They keep asking about you," he said. "You're like some kind of folk hero." "I'm just a woman who knew what soup was supposed to taste like," she replied. He laughed. "Well, you saved more than your own skin. Business is up 40%. "I'll be in Tuesday," she said. "Don't water down the coffee." The part that stunned her came in a padded envelope. Inside was a printed copy of a medical journal, Clinical Alert Quarterly. Dr. Emily's name on the front, followed by the title, "Silent Doses: The Overlooked Epidemic of Sedative Abuse Among Elders." It was sharp, scientific, blunt, and tucked in the acknowledgments at the end. "Special thanks to MV, whose sharp mind and sharper resolve saved lives." Marlene stared at that line for a long time, the room utterly still except for the ticking of the antique kitchen clock. She folded the journal gently and placed it on the shelf next to her nursing license, now encased in a weathered walnut frame. Sunday morning, the mail came late. Among bills and grocery flyers, one bright yellow postcard stood out. A cartoon owl in a graduation cap grinned from the front. On the back, in Zoe's neat blocky handwriting, "Professors are assigning your article. Campus is buzzing. They think you're fictional. I told them you're very real. I'm keeping your legacy safe, one seminar at a time." The pot simmered quietly on the stove, the scent of roasted garlic, thyme, and sweet yellow corn drifting through Marlene's kitchen like a calm promise. She stood in silence, stirring gently, the wooden spoon tapping the edges of her favorite Dutch oven. It had once belonged to her mother. Tonight it was feeding 3 of the few people she trusted. The past year had taken pieces of her. Tonight she was reclaiming them, one ladle at a time. The doorbell rang right as she turned off the burner. Zoe was first, pink cheeks from the chill, hair still damp from the shower. carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers in one hand and a textbook in the other. "These are from the college quad," she said, setting them in an empty glass on the table. "Don't worry, not poisonous." Marlene smirked. "You're never gonna let that go, are you?" Zoe shrugged. "Not when it saved your life." Dr. Emily arrived next, dressed in jeans and a Columbia sweatshirt, her eyes soft behind wire-frame glasses. "I brought wine," she said, holding up a bottle of rosé. "Not the sleepy kind." Julian came last, apron still tied at the waist, a faint dusting of flour clinging to his sleeves. He set down a paper bag. "Homemade bread," he said, grinning, "and not a pill in sight." They all laughed. The room felt full before anyone sat down. Marlene ladled the soup into thick ceramic bowls. The broth was golden flecked with fresh parsley and bits of tender chicken. It smelled like warmth, like everything that hadn't broken her. They sat, hands resting gently on napkins, not quite touching but tethered all the same. "To truth," Marlene said, raising her glass. "To survival," Emily added. "To never drinking someone else's smoothie," Zoe chimed in. They laughed again, but this time it wasn't edged with defense. It was real, whole. Julian leaned forward, and to not staying quiet. Glasses clinked, the soup steamed. The silence that followed was peaceful, not empty. After dessert, apple crumble with oat topping and vanilla whipped cream, Marlene pulled something from the small bag she'd tucked under the table earlier. A wooden plaque, polished and simple, carved with brass letters, "For those who refuse to stay quiet." She turned to Dr. Emily. "Would the clinic be willing to hang this up?" Near reception, Emily's mouth tightened, eyes shining. "We'd be honored." Marlene nodded. "Then let's never pretend this kind of thing doesn't happen again." In the weeks that followed, law students across the Midwest studied the Voss Fetfol case notes, surveillance transcripts, lab reports. Marlene's testimony became required viewing in elder law seminars. The pie crust test became an ethics exam question. "She's the reason we revamped intake for elder complaints," one Ohio DA admitted in an interview. Marlene read that line in a local journal one morning with coffee, eyebrows raised. "Imagine that," she murmured. "An old woman with a wooden spoon changes policy." That night, brushing her hair before bed, Marlene looked into the mirror above her vanity. No tremble in her hands, no weight behind her eyes, no mask. "I see you," she whispered to her reflection. And she did. For the first time in years there was no pretending, no shrinking to keep peace, no biting her tongue to be the good mother. What they tried to bury had risen and taken root. She had been their target, but she'd made herself into their reckoning. She walked to the window and looked out at her quiet street. The porch light flickered gently. A car drove by, its headlights low and slow. In the distance, the wind carried the faint sound of laughter. Some neighbor's evening meal, maybe. Marlene didn't flinch at the noise. She closed the curtain with calm hands. Tomorrow there would be work to do. New volunteers to train, more panels to prepare for. But tonight she had survived. She had served, and the story had been hers to write.